Welcome to Lesson 11, the digestive system. We're going to finish off the digestive system in this lesson, and this is video 1. So last lesson in lesson 10, we really talked about kind of all the anatomy of the different organs and a little bit about the function, but this lesson really focuses on the different functions of the digestive system. And the essential functions include 6 different processes. We have ingestion, 2 types of food breakdown, mechanical and chemical, absorption, propulsion, and defecation. So first let's talk about ingestion. So ingestion only occurs in the mouth, and this is you actually putting food into the mouth. So it's a voluntary process. So if I asked you on a test, where does ingestion take place, your only answer would be the mouth. A lot of these different functions take place in multiple organs, but ingestion only takes place within the mouth. Then we have propulsion. Propulsion is basically moving food from one organ to the next. So swallowing is an example of propulsion, and it depends on peristalsis. Peristalsis is that contraction of the smooth muscle in waves that basically allows food to move through the GI tract. And then there's another type of propulsion called segmentation. And this is actually really cool. It takes place a lot of times in the intestines, and it allows foodstuff to kind of be separated and mixed with digestive enzymes so that you're kind of moving it from one little area to the next. But both are types of propulsion, which is just movement. So the top picture here, this is our basic just peristalsis. So you can see this would be like in the esophagus, for example, we swallow the bolus, and just using that smooth muscle, we're going to force the food down. And then here would be an example of segmentation. So this is going to occur more in like the small intestine. So we have multiple kind of contractions that create these little pockets so the food can mix with different digestive enzymes, and this is what really helps create that mixture. Then we have food breakdown, and we're going to talk about mechanical digestion first. So this is the mixing of the food in the mouth by the tongue, the churning of the food in the stomach. Basically, this is actually like physically breaking it down. So when you're chewing stuff or mixing food with your tongue, you are literally mechanically breaking it down. So chewing, using your tongue, and then using the muscles in the stomach to really churn the food are all really good examples of mechanical digestion, or actually physically breaking it down into smaller particles. Then we have chemical digestion, which is the use of enzymes or different digestive juices to help break down the little molecules into even tinier molecules. So obviously when you eat a cheeseburger, you don't have cheeseburger just running through your veins. We use this chemical digestion here to break down that cheeseburger into our various large macromolecules that we need to use. And we do this through hydrolysis, which basically we just add water molecules to it using those enzymes, and it really helps to just speed this up. So our carbs are broken down into monosaccharides, the most important being glucose, which is our blood sugar. A lot of times we get carbohydrates in milk, which is lactose, and then starch in potatoes, and then different breads as well. And then proteins are going to break down into amino acids, which are really important for rebuilding up proteins that we need in the body. And then fats are broken down into fatty acids and glycerols, which are then used to make things like cell membranes or even store as extra energy. Then we have absorption. This is allowing nutrients and things we need like water or those little carbohydrate glucose molecules now into the bloodstream. This is mostly going to take place in the small intestines. That's where your proteins, your fats, and your carbohydrates are going to be mostly absorbed. And this is just making sure that we can actually get this food into the bloodstream so that we're able to use it. And once we've absorbed everything that we want to, we have to get rid of any indigestible residue, and that's going to be our defecation. And defecation only occurs in that large intestine in the anus. So let's get into the actual things that occur at each organ. So first we're going to start with the mouth, pharynx, and esophagus. This is where food ingestion and breakdown occurs. And we also have some peristalsis too, moving food through the esophagus. So mastication is our chewing, and this is a great example of mechanical breakdown because you're physically breaking it down. We also have chemical digestion occurring in the mouth because you release this really cool enzyme in your saliva called salivary amylase, which helps break down carbohydrates. For example, if you took like a cracker and you chewed it for like an obnoxious amount of time, the salivary amylase would start to make the cracker taste really sweet because you're actually breaking it down into those simple sugars. No absorption is taking place in the mouth, but we're definitely doing, like I said, ingestion, the breakdown, and then moving the food through this area to get to the stomach. The pharynx and the esophagus, it's really just movement. Okay, so let's get into the actual swallowing and how this actually works. So swallowing is referred to as deglution, and it's a really complex process. We kind of just do it and don't really think about it, but it's really complex, and it occurs in two phases. One is called the buccal phase, and buccal means cheek, so this totally makes sense. So first you're going to basically swallow and force the bolus into the pharynx by the tongue. And then the second phase is the pharyngeal esophageal phase. This is where we're actually transporting food through the pharynx and the esophagus using our peristalsis. And once it hits that distal end of the esophagus, it'll cause that cardioesophageal sphincter to open, which then allows the food to enter into the stomach. So here is our swallowing. Okay, here's our first stage, our buccal phase. We're literally taking the bolus and forcing it back into the pharynx with our tongue. And then our second stage is we're just using peristalsis to force the bolus down, and it will keep going until it hits that cardioesophageal sphincter and then into the stomach. All right, our activities of the stomach. We have our food breakdown. This is basically what the stomach does. It's a lot of breakdown, and you have gastric juice that we talked about when we looked at the anatomy of the stomach and all the different cells and the things that they secrete. So what actually controls the release of this gastric juice? Well, one is your parasympathetic nervous system. If you remember, this is one that you do not have control of, and basically the sight of food, the smell of food, the taste of food is literally going to stimulate the neurons that allow this gastric juice to be secreted. And if you think about it, once again, that makes sense, because once you smell or see food that is intriguing to you, your stomach starts to rumble and your mouth starts to water. That's what this is. And then we have gastrin. This is a hormone that's secreted by the stomach when food is present and the pH is rising. So this is going to cause the release of more pepsinogens, which are those protein digesting enzymes, and hydrochloric acid. Hydrochloric acid is really important in food breakdown. It's really acidic, and one of the big things is it helps to break down food, but it also creates a super hostile environment for microorganisms. It's really important. We want to kill any bacteria or anything nasty in our food before it enters into our small intestines, which then is going to enter into the bloodstream. Very little absorption takes place in the stomach, but there actually is some. A little protein, alcohol, and aspirin takes place in the stomach. A lot of medicines usually do get absorbed in the stomach, which kind of is nice because we do want it to be fast. But alcohol is a major cause of ulcers. If you drink a lot of alcohol and you absorb it in your stomach, it really can help break down that stomach wall, which is no bueno. Stomach also begins to stretch as food enters and the gastric juices are secreted. Something really cool about the stomach is you have 3 layers of smooth muscle that kind of run in all different directions so that you can really actually churn the food with that gastric juice and create chyme, which is the food once it's now mixed with those gastric juices. Then we have food propulsion. Obviously, it's really important. We got to move the food from one area to the next. So the propulsion is really kind of interesting because it's going to start to occur up and then move down as our chyme is being formed and moving down, and it forces food down into the pylaic sphincter. Each contraction of the stomach only allows a very small amount of food to enter into the stomach at a time. 3 milliliters or less of that chyme is actually going to hit in through that pyloric sphincter and enter into the small intestine. And then we'll talk about that, why that is later, but it is really important that we only allow 3 milliliters or less in at a time. All right, we're going to go ahead and pause there, and when we come back, we're going to finish up with our activities of the small intestine, the activities of the large intestines, and a little bit of nutrition.